Graham Triggs. Here we go. So, Graham Triggs is the head of repository services at Symplectic. I got that right, Graham? Okay. And he's going to talk about Vivo.
Yep.
Yeah. So pass it over to Graham. There you go.
Okay, so as Claire said, I work for Symplectic and I integrate our element system with repositories. And so my talk is about, well, rather what it's not about is repositories themselves. We've all got repositories. We know about repositories. We know about their benefits for open access and preservation. We also know they have drawbacks. They tend to just be sort of file stores. There's no real visualizations in there about how the data connects, linking between the items in a repository, being able to disambiguate authors. All of that is kind of weak. One solution to that is to actually use another system for presenting a different layer of the research, a different view of the research in your institution. One system is Vivo, it's a research networking system. It's actually been around for about 10 years. It's developed out of Cornell. And about 4 years ago, they got a large sort of funding from NIH to sort of develop this as a broad sort of countrywide network. So the idea that lots of institutions can run these Vivo systems, all speak in this common ontology, and actually be able to link all of these up. And so various partners were taken on there, and there are now a lot of installations, particularly in America, but there's things sort of all around the world, like Griffith have one down in Australia. The whole system is sort of based on linked open data. So it's all sort of triple-based information about the research and all the sort of objects captured at the university. It's not just publications. You've got information, there's ontologies to describe sort of courses and events, organization information, professional activities, and even the people themselves. People are resources in the system and linked to publications. So the benefits of this, you've got Sparkle endpoints that people can query, integrate with. You've got things like Vivo Search that aggregates all of this information. So, this actually came out of the Vivo Search things. This is a view of the institutional data across various, view of the data across many institutions. And yeah, it's about creating a network for you to be able to discover, not just in your own university. It is a showcase for your university, but it's also a way of discovering across multiple universities. So the problem with this is, how do you populate the system? And they have a harvester mechanism that you can actually take data from various sources. And they have example scripts for taking data from CSVs and taking it from PubMed and Scopus. So you could populate it from your repository. You could sort of export stuff to CSV and sort of pull it into Vivo, and but your repository is only sort of a partial view of your research. It's generally only the stuff that you've already made open access, the stuff that you've got full text content for, and you need to supplement that with all the other stuff that you've haven't got the content for. You want things out of PubMed or Scopus, and you want to sort of pull that in there as well. That's kind of tricky because you've got stuff in your repository that's actually also going to be in PubMed, so or also in Scopus. And how are you going to sort of pull all of these together and not have sort of multiple copies, multiple resources in Vivo describing the same work? And also, problem of disambiguating authors. You still, if you're pulling from things like PubMed and Scopus, how do you know that an author on one paper is the same author on another paper? You can, yeah, they've got the same name, but they may be in different departments. They may actually be at different institutions. You don't know who that actual author is. So how do you actually solve all of these challenges of doing this disambiguation and pulling in from multiple data sources and getting one clean picture of what's all the research and all the sort of resources at your university? So one solution is to actually use a research information management system or a CRIS, like Elements or Pure or Convaris, whatever else. As we know, the research management systems actually do a lot of this stuff already in terms of harvesting data from multiple sources and actually making it easy for you to disambiguate all of that information and link it sort of clearly to the authors and be very sort of precise about those relationships. And we've already spoken before at conferences like this about linking those systems with your repository so that then people aren't duplicating work, they can actually manage their publications in the CRIS system and deposit the full text easily into their repository and take the metadata with you. Content links. But what's also interesting about the CRIS system, because if we're doing the deposits to the repository, we've got information about what's in the repository when we've got that. And we can export this via the API. So, as well as having all your users, all your publications, you actually get the links to the repository in the API. So then if you harvest from a CRIS system and put that into Vivo, this is an open source harvester that we support for Elements, you can actually take all of that information with the links and put that into Vivo. This example is actually sort of went live a couple of months ago. This is Duke University in America. And you can see on the left-hand side, there's a Scholars at Duke system is their Vivo instance. And because they've harvested all of that data out of the Element system that they're running, they're getting the links to the repository. And that's pointing directly to the items in the repository. So you've got the Vivo system that's making it easy to discover all this content and is able to link into sort of national networks and sort of helps discovery, and then that can drive through to actually getting the content from the repository. We've also been doing stuff with data sets as well. So we've got integrations with FigShare. We can pull information from FigShare. And you see here there's an embedded view of FigShare on this article, because FigShare now has this sort of embedded support that you can sort of integrate into other systems. And because, again, once we've got all of this information inside the CRIS, we can harvest that into Vivo as well. So, your portal of everything that you've done that's in Vivo, that's showcasing everything, you can have not just links to the repository, but sort of embedded content from FigShare and everything that representations of everything that you're harvesting out of the research system. That's it.
Thank you very much, Greg. Does anybody have any questions for Graham? No? Thank you. And next up we have Pablo de Castro and Jackie. This one.
Okay, good morning, everyone. This is a presentation about the STARS shared initiative that has been carried out by the UK UK RepoStranet Plus project, also known as the RepNets, together with the University of St Andrews Library and the Scottish Digital Library Consortium, SDLC. It will be presented by Jacqueline Proven, Repository Support Officer at the University of St Andrews Library, and myself, Pablo de Castro, from the UK RepoStranet Plus project. We would first like to acknowledge Claire Knowles from SDLC as well, whose support has been critical for the success of this shared initiative. So this STARS also incidentally stands for St Andrews, RepNet and SDLC. Its aim is to provide enhancements to the specific research information management configuration, that is a CRIS IR system at the University of St Andrews. This is a brief insight on the presentation structure. So we will be first saying a few words about the RepNet project, then explaining why, what the landscape looks like in terms of system infrastructure. It's quite a complex landscape in terms of configuration and different stakeholders working together for providing repository services. We will show very briefly what the specific research information management system is at the University of St Andrews, and then we will go through the whole set of items on the STARS work program for enhancing this mixed CRIS-IR system at the university. We will finally show a set of lessons learned through the initiative. The RepNet project, here is the brand new website for the project, is an initiative for putting together a socio-technical infrastructure for supporting a wide range of repository services and their delivery to the UK repository network. On the slide we can see the main components as they are called for the RepNets, so the big services that are part of the project. So IRIS for repository usage collection across the network, Romeo and Juliet for delivering the policies regarding publishers or funders and institutions, and finally the broker for automatic content delivery into the repository network. On the lower side of the slide we have the different strands that the RepNet is covering in terms of repository services, including aggregation, benchmarking, repository registries, deposit, metadata enhancement, and continuity of access or preservation. So it's a wide range of services the project has been working on. The RepNet was initially conceived as a project to deliver services, as I said, on the UK repository network. However, as the time went by, the situation has deeply evolved, both in terms of infrastructure, of system configuration, and of policy as well, with the publication of the Fringe report and further open access policies release. So we found out, as we carried out some surveying, that there were not so many standalone repositories anymore across the network, but the situation had deeply evolved, as I said, into a much more complex landscape of mixed system with with a lot of CRIS systems being now available at different institutions, especially research-intensive ones. So what the RepNet did was carrying out a definition of a set of use cases in terms of system infrastructure availability, ranging from standalone repositories, that's quite a number of institutions anyway, those are the green ones, the green dots on the screen, to CRIS-only solutions, which are nowadays relatively frequent. Those are the yellow dots on the screen, and through a set of midway use cases covering IR plus CRIS implementations, linked IR plus CRIS, or merged IR plus CRIS, also IR plus symplectic. There is quite a discussion to be held on this. There will be an additional session on RepNet findings and lessons learned tomorrow, where we will have the chance to more deeply discuss a number of technical issues that will arise along this presentation. So another of the findings the RepNet collected from this surveying we carried out was the fact that many institutions rely on external service providers for either hosting and or maintaining their repositories. So that adds a bit additional complexity into the landscape definition. So this initiative, STARS, is a very good example of how, it's a very good experiment for the RepNet to test repository service provision on an institution that both has a complex system configuration, that is a repository plus a CRIS system, and also relies on an external service provider, namely the Scottish Digital Library Consortium, for repository service provision. So I'll hand over to Jackie now.
This is, some of you may have seen this slide at various other presentations, which gradually develops over time. But this is just to give you an insight into our infrastructure at St Andrews. You'll notice that the CRIS system tends to sit right in the middle of the diagram and is doing lots of things, pulling in data from various systems, synchronizing with internal systems, pushing information out in various places. And this represents our DSpace repository in our case, which of course is linked for us with Pure. And again, in our situation, is a full text only repository. So just to clarify how our kind of flow works, the Pure system is where everything is gathered, so metadata and everything is there. We can add publications to it. We have a portal, which is the front end of our Pure system, and when things are made visible, they will show in our portal as our showcase of all the research. And a subset of that is when you put the full text into the Pure system, it will get passed across. Once it's had validation done on it, it will pass across into our DSpace repository, which will then pass back a link, which will end up with a little link to the full text in the repository. So it's actually quite critical to bear in mind how that flow works, and basically that everything is influenced by the source in Pure. So what we do in the repository is always affected by that.
So getting into the gist of STARS, this is actually the work program for the shared initiative, covering, as I said, quite a number of system enhancements ranging from the source endpoint enabling on either the CRIS or the repository. This is one of the main issues here, whether we should work on enhancing the CRIS or the repository or both, covering IRIS UK implementation on the repository, open air compliance, examining REOX implementation requirements, and an additional number of enhancements we will now go through. First one is IRIS. IRIS, you probably know about this project carried out by MIMES and Cranfield University, is a project for collecting counter-compliant article-level cross-repository usage across the whole UK repository network. This is the map of its current implementation. IRIS has been installed on 35 repositories so far, and it's aiming to provide a wider coverage on the whole network.
So for us, what I would say is the implementation for IRIS was really easy, certainly easy for me because Claire did it. So basically it was installing a patch onto DSpace 1.8, and I just watched the emails going back and forward, and it was done. So it was straightforward. And then the very next day, statistics started to appear, so we've been looking at that. 2 months on, what we've done, we've got some monthly stats, and we've started analysing and looking at the comparison with our Google Analytics stats that we have embedded already in our repository. And we've found some quite clear discrepancies, so basically there's lots more work to do to look at that. We have fed that back to IRIS and had some interesting discussions about why that is and what we need to look at. We'll probably cover that in more detail in the roundtable session about why there's discrepancies there. The open air implementation, we decided to test this out on our DSpace repository, really because we could get into the system and do things with it. Pure at the moment is very tied up in things like managing the ref process, so development on that system can't take place just right at the moment. So essentially for the open air sort of testing strand, we created a collection, very easy to find some EU-funded publications because of the CRIS system that has all that data in it. We added the relevant fields. But again, we've now hit an issue with the validation, and there are some issues that we'll need to investigate, which we'll, again, follow up with more discussion probably tomorrow. Just to say, Pure is also going through the stages of becoming open air compliant, so at some point we would like to be testing that out with Pure as well.
Repository junction broker implementation on the CRIS IR system is one of the best examples of this dichotomy between running a service on the repository or on the CRIS IR system. The RJB is a RepNet component, RepNet service for delivering sort mediated transfers, content transfers into repositories. This is the description of the two potential ways in which content could be automatically ingested into either the CRIS or the repository at St Andrews. The first one is through a sort importer, the content gets directly ingested into the full text research at St Andrews repository. We have to keep in mind that this is a full text only repository, so metadata only items could pose some issues in this regard. The other option would be to deliver the content into the CRIS system from which it will later be taken on to the repository. It could be done through a push mechanism that is involving sorts and its implementation on top of the CRIS system, or it could be done through a pull mechanism by using the broker as a sort of web service from which the CRIS could collect the actual information.
That's stopped now, so I guess we need to go to the last slide.
All right, so this is the lesson learned for us, for the RepNet project. This was a very interesting opportunity for testing the landscape that we had been researching, and also the whole set of services application into a very specific use case at an institution.
And just for us to say, this whole opportunity has opened up lots of lines of communication. We've built bridges with various people and stakeholders, and we definitely want to keep those open and keep working and figuring out where to make these developments happen. So, thank you.
Has anybody got any questions? Okay, so I'll speak out loud. My name is Balvia from JISC. So just a few clarifications. So the RepNet project is a JISC-funded project, and it's coming to it came to an end yesterday, I think. But we are looking at the national repository shared services and looking at that in terms of delivering those as shared services from beyond today. Just to say that with Iris, it's more than article level articles that they're downloading. So it's all types of content, user statistics. So and it's really great to see that you've plugged into Iris, and it's a plug for Iris really. So I'm just saying, if you're not already being harvested by Iris, which is Institution Repository User Statistics, and they're at MyMass, please get in touch with them, because we've got about 30 repositories which they're harvesting from, and in actual fact the figures that we're getting just over since I think July 2013 in terms of overall downloads, in terms of from 30 repositories. At the beginning we only had 8, is in the region of like 3.5 million downloads, and of those I think it's 2.5 million, or I think it's 1.5 million are research articles. So
we're getting really interesting figures about repositories and their usage, and we'll hopefully be getting publisher downloads later on as well. But thank you, that's really great to see your integration with IRIS and Repository Junction Broker as well.
Let me briefly mention the article level statistics doesn't mean that it's covering only articles, research articles. That is the definition is opposite to journal level usage collection. That was the former counter compliance level of delivery.
It's the counter compliance which is the important part. Rather than every single university having to apply counter compliance, it's done at the aggregate level, so it's saving some time and cost as well.
And to add to that, our repository, I'm only talking about the links with Pure, but we also have our e-theses which go direct into our repository. So obviously it's combining those and presenting some really good stats for our e-thesis downloads as well.
Exactly, yeah.
I'm not anymore. I used to be lead developer on the ePrints project for enough years. I want to say a bit about what I've been doing since. I'm now an open data developer, very fashionable, like people are funding it because they're not sure what it is yet and think it might be important, which is helpful. I've retained a kind of fetish for repositories, but don't work on them directly anymore. And I want to say a bit about what I've been up to and how it's relevant to you guys. First of all, we've just established data.ac.uk. And the response I get quite often is, who the hell are you and what right do you have to set that up? And the answer is no one is important enough to be in charge of Data.ac UK. Good God, it should have a committee of very important academics. But until then, until we get someone important doing it, I'm going to get on with it. It's not being run the same way that data.gov. They were run on a shoestring and we're running on a lot less than that. I used to say that it had the advantage of not being funded so it couldn't get cancelled. It's now accidentally got part of it's been funded by Hefke. But, so we're about, I'll talk about that in a second. But the vision for this is to act as a hub for open data and linked data and various data things in the academic community, and primarily to give them subdomains so they don't have stupid subdomains, because Janet and JISC won't give you, or whoever it is who gives the subdomains, won't let you have really generic ones usually. And when you're creating a permanent web address or something for a project that's going to go on a long time, you don't want to call it the acronym of your project or the name of your university. If this was branded University of Southampton, your boss would go, oh, not invented here, can we make our own? So the idea is you can work with the Data.ac UK community to register a domain like, publications.data.ac.uk as either a hub for discovery or as an aggregator. The current method is I'm in charge until someone deposes me, at which point I'll be relieved and go and do something else. And to get a subdomain, you convince the mailing list it's not a stupid idea. So the big initial initiative we've been working on is, as I say, accidentally got funded to my terror by Hefke. I was doing this for funsies and they said, oh, that's good. And this is a database, the national portal to UK higher education research equipment. So if you want to find a laser, oh, find one. And if you want to find a DNA sequencer, which I know there's one in Edinburgh, a DNA sequencer? Actually, the Edinburgh one's got a slight bug that it thinks the Rosalind Institute is 748 kilometres away, and I need to fix that. We've got a job description going out this week or next week for a full-time developer, and then hopefully we'll have less bugs. So far, all the code's on GitHub, so you can go and fix it for me if you want. But the way this works is through basic open data principles. And why is this relevant to repositories? The next step for us is to start exporting this into our ePrints repository as a category for our University of Southampton things. We've now got an ID for every major item of equipment and every research facility, and we've got 70 research facilities and 400 items of equipment listed. And then we can start associating papers with equipment. And so, well, yes, you don't make any money, but that microscope never made us a penny, but it got 5 4-star papers, so it was worth doing. And so that ties it into the repositories community. It's also, look, it's detected we're in Edinburgh. It just looks, I must be on a .edac UK IP address, so it's searching by Edinburgh, not Southampton. And for the older academics, it also does miles. That apparently was an issue. Okay, so the Roslin Institute have their data listed on... Can I slow down? I've got a lot to get through in only 10 minutes. That's point one, I've got 3 points. Right, actually I think that was point 1 and 2. I am going fast, aren't I? All the coffee. Okay, the Roslin Institute in Edinburgh have open data about their research equipment. And the title of my talk here is, if it's not open if no one can find it. And the problem is they don't have a lot of equipment. They've got maybe 10, 15 items. And the obvious way of doing this, the old web, whatever it was way, would be to have someone in charge, in the centre, who you send the data to, and you either email us or you create an account with us. But that's not very webby. It's not the network, and it's stupid. And it means that if I die and Southampton, or the nuclear vessel in Southampton explodes, you lose everything. And it's really expensive to maintain all these relationships. And I want to make... I've worked out, saying doing it on the cheap sounds really bad. So what we're doing is we're ensuring that the service is sustainable. And the way we're doing this is, at the moment, I'm building relationships with people, we're working with them, but they put the data on their website and I get it from their website, but that's not scalable. This is scalable. If we look at the Roslin Institute homepage, there's a little bit in here. I get technical fast, as you can tell. So somewhere in here, we have, he says, optimistically, this line. It's very exciting. This makes my day. And that line there says the open organisation, the open data for the organisation is at that web address. So you now can trust the person running the website trusts that URL and says this is about us. That contains this data, which is a bit unreadable, so I'll make it a little prettier. And that is the same data, just in colour. And it says, we are the Roslin Institute. That's what you should call us, but we don't mind if we sometimes get called those things, but don't put it on the official page. And we are here, which is data that I'm not picking up yet, which is why it thinks it's easting, northing, 0, 0. And the important bit for me, this little bit here. This is equipment data, so subject, equipment, organisation Roslin Institute, and that's the web address. So and it also says it conforms to the UNIQUIP standard, which is just saying what headings to put at the top of the spreadsheet to say description, equipment name. You can guess what would go in there. And now I can auto-discover, it's CSV. You've seen CSV before, I hope. Imagine that was a pretty grid. I've just loaded the tab up. I can now get this data every morning confidently from the Roslin Institute and compile it into a database that you can search here and see data from the Roslin Institute. I'm not a web scientist, I do live demos. And it works. And that's data, and you can follow from equipment.data back to check that this really is legit. That we've got all the trust built into it, and no one has to build up a professional relationship with 200 organisations around the country. What's neater is if you don't want to do a database of research equipment at universities, you want to do one of research equipment or heavy items of commercial equipment in Southampton, you just harvest from all of the organisations in Southampton instead. Nick our software, it's all on GitHub. But the design being that you could have an Irish aggregation, which was Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland. And you've then got the advantage of the network instead of having one authority, because you shouldn't trust me. You should trust that the system has the trust inherent and that I'm not important on it. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much to Chris, and I'm sure the ties into my keynote this morning, which I think. Has anybody got any questions for Chris?
Oh God.
Les has questions.
Softball it.
Any chance of grants on the web being rolled into this so that RC UK can take advantage of it?
There's a website called Gateway to Research, which is aggregating a whole, shout out for GTR, and they're working on a database of grants, which they've got a mishmash of data from all the different research councils, and I'm very keen to link up our definitions of things with theirs as soon as theirs is stable, but they're at the whim of difficult data providers, I believe. I should say the other real value is if you've seen anything about URIs, the advantage of a AC UK URI is that it can survive all the random reorganisations inflicted. And you can have a URI that describes the thing rather than a URI that describes who coined the URI. Which we are going to get all remixed, randomised and moved between organisations and things, and you don't want the national definition of something to be at .sotonacuk web address for, you might not, it might need to be managed by University of Edinburgh later. Any other questions?
No? Thank you. Yeah, it's you next, sorry.
The next one up. That's it. This is why we discover it doesn't work.
Hi. Lastly, before lunch, I'd like to introduce you to Tim Gollins, who's Head of Digital Preservation at the National Archives.
Do I need... whatever. Right. Good morning, afternoon, whatever time it is. That says it all. So we'll go on to the next slide. And that kind of says the rest of it. I'm going to talk about digital preservation at the National Archives. I've got no idea why this has got anything to do with repositories, but nevertheless, somebody asked me to do it, so I will. This is what we do. We look after things for a long time. A question for you. There's a concept, it's a bit of a daft concept, but the concept of describing an activity in only 2 lines, okay? I'll give you an illustration. The concept of flying an aeroplane, an airline pilot, the 2-line description is 1, don't crash, 2, if you crash, land on water, because then it puts the fire out. Okay, your challenge for the rest of this talk to think about it in the background is what's the 2-line description for digital preservation? Okay? Right, so I want to talk to you about the threats to material survival. Information that we receive, information that you guys put in your repositories. There is a connection to repositories here. I thought there might be somewhere. What do we think the threats are? Well, everyone talks about the file format threat, okay? That's what everyone will tell you. That's what all the research papers tell you. We'll talk about that in a minute. I want to talk to you about media obsolescence. I want to talk to you about the fact that if somebody brings you a CD and you put it in your drawer, will it be there in 20 years' time? Or at least the CD will be there, but will the data be there? If they brought you a floppy disk 10 years ago and you put it in your drawer, or in my case, when I saved my dissertation on a zip disk, do you remember the zip disks? They were really good. You could somehow squeeze more data onto them than was physically possible. I never quite worked out how they worked, but I can't read it any longer. Thank God I took it off and stuck it on my system at work, so that the IT department put it on a disk. And then when they changed the disk, they migrated it. Oh, idea. Right, so media obsolescence. Get it off removable media, okay? Rule 1. What about hardware obsolescence and operating system obsolescence? Well, I'm not aware of many files that aren't readable today because of either of those issues in practice. In my world, now careful here, I'm talking about the National Archives, I'm talking about the public record system, I'm not talking about institutional repositories taking complex scientific data in complex contexts, okay? So you'll have to bear that in mind as I speak, and all of you will be going, yes, but this doesn't apply to us, because we have all this complexity and all this difficulty. Just step back a minute and think carefully before you think that, because you may be buying some costs that you don't need. Okay, talk about file format obsolescence. Let's think carefully about this. Let's look at the reality of file formats in an administrative institution. This is the reality of the file formats that are in the National Archives' own EDRMS. Remember, the National Archives is a government department. The National Archives creates information itself. This isn't the National Archives' digital collection. This is the National Archives' own EDRMS of administrative data. Look at that graph. Isn't it an interesting graph? So we've got something like does that say 12 million? I can't read the numbers. No, 1.2 million. I can't count. No, 12 million. 1.2 million. I can't do the commas in my head. It's terrible. 1.2 million emails sitting in our repository. Oh, that's interesting. But that's nearly 60% of the total volume. And then the next one are docs. Well, of course they are, because we produce bits of paper, don't we? Everybody does. And then XLS, because we've got to do some finance, so we've got some spreadsheets. And then there's some PDFs. And if you look at the numbers, almost nothing else matters, right? Everything's now down into the noise. Now, you should understand that this doesn't stop here. This graph goes over here, okay? There are 800 of these things going out this way, but the percent, I couldn't get that all on the same piece of paper. So, so should I worry about the 800th format? Really? How much money have you got? I want to talk to you about economics. We're the National Archives, so let's imagine that the National Archives, as a government department, is illustrative of all government departments. We probably are, right? Because government departments tend to produce stuff like this. Oh, and someone's going to say, but what about all the things that are attached to the messages, aren't you? That's the thing you're going to come at me next. Well, what I'm going to tell you is if you take that one out of that thing out of that line out of the graph stays the same shape. The numbers change a bit, as you would expect, but the graph stays exactly the same shape. It remains a power law, okay? And I'm pretty confident that all of the things that are in the messages as attachments actually are all the formats that are there. So if we just read it, it's just moving the numbers about. It doesn't change anything, doesn't change the story. So do I need to worry about my file formats, given that this is the stuff that's going to be coming to the National Archives in the next 20, 30 years? Well, I'm not terribly worried, because most of those are pretty readable. Most of those are not going to become obsolete for quite a little while, I would suggest. Why do I think that? Well, that's to do with economics, that's to do with the internet, that's to do with the fact that there are billions of docs out there in the world that somebody somewhere is going to want to read. So it doesn't matter how much money I've got, the people who want to read those files on the internet have got more money than me. They've probably got more money than the whole of the UK government has got, let alone the budget of the National Archives. So they're going to solve my problem for me. They're going to solve my problem of readability of this material, because this graph is the same graph, or very similar graph, that was published by I can't remember the guy's name now, it's just gone straight out of my head, from the British Library recently. Never mind, it'll come back to me in a minute. Looking at file formats on the internet. Now, so, in conclusion to this bit, the National Archives doesn't do file format migration. The National Archives puts stuff in a repository. Repository, not one of your repositories. It's a big sort of thing we built ourselves, but it is a repository in all intents and purposes. And then we look after the bits. And then we give these things, when they come back, when somebody wants to look at them, we give them to the customer. Because do you know what? The customer can read these, and probably will do for quite some time. And when they can't, we'll worry about it then. I'm not going to worry about it now. Now, why is that? Because how long is your repository going to survive? Just a thought.
Might make it till the end of the rep.
Good point, man. Good point. No, but seriously, the technology your repository is based on. What's the oldest piece of technology you're actually using in your IT environment at the moment? How old is it? Software systems, big complex systems. Is it more than 10 years old? A few might be. More than 15 years old? Not many. I've never come across a system in government, and government's pretty good at keeping old systems, right? I've been in this game for 25 years now, and I haven't come across a system that was operational more than 15 years after it was first built. It's been replaced, it's been upgraded, it's been changed, it's been improved. Okay, so you have to ask yourself, will any of the threats that your data is going to be coming up against arrive before your system is obsolete? Because if it is, you don't need to address that threat. This is the concept of parsimonious preservation. You can read the paper. You'll see on the at the end of the presentation, there's a whole set of links. It says I've got 2 minutes, so I'm going to go back to the question at the beginning. What's the 2-line thing for digital preservation? This is about knowing my file formats, okay? This is about knowing what I've got. So I'm going to assert to you line 1 of digital preservation is know what you've got. Have a catalogue, know what file format you're dealing with. Because somebody, somewhere, is going to want the 800th file format, and when that does go obsolete, you do have to deal with it. But you don't deal with it up front, you deal with it when you need to. Line 2, keep the bits safe. Because all that matters at the end of the day is that I can guarantee when somebody asks for a public record that the thing I give them was the public record I received from the government department. At the end of the day, nothing else matters. It's about Shannon's information theory. If I do anything to that record, if I haven't got a hash code for it, if I can't prove it was the same thing that came to me, the National Archives has failed. It's what we do with paper, it's what we have to do with digital. So the 2-line thing for digital preservation is know what you've got, keep the bits safe. Thank you.
Just a point of information, in the NHS there are systems over 15 years old.
Good point. NHS is a very notable exception.
In many ways.
Yes, yes. And the NHS has got a big digital preservation problem for that very reason. Interestingly enough, there don't seem to be many people actually appear to be addressing it, to my knowledge. You are? Good. Excellent.
Got any other questions for Tim? No? Well, oh, yeah.
Oh, go on, Kevin.
Well, not really a question, an observation. I mean, I agree with just about everything you said, Tim. It's it is a great observation. But I know you did say at the end that although this idea of counting the frequency of formats is a good way as a first cut to the problem.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the analogy with physical materials that an institution like the National Archives deal with, there are times when the thing that doesn't occur very often is quite significant in terms of its information content. And that is when, as you say, you put in the effort. You've got some quite unusual railway maps, as an example. Incredibly awkward, long things to deal with.
Yes.
But they're about the most important record that came out of those organisations, so you do put the effort in.
Exactly. And but that's precisely the point. In fact, the point is that the long tail is interesting, is because you can invest relatively cheaply in dealing with the spike, and then you've got the resource to identify the British Railway maps, to identify the really strange and the really obscure medieval charter that requires you to spend hundreds and thousands of pounds with people carefully curating it. But that's the thing out there, that's the thing at the end of the long tail. If you don't know the shape and you can't identify what you've got, you end up attempting to curate the whole lot to the same level, and that is completely impossible in any institution budget that I'm aware of, and that's the point.
Are there any other questions or comments? No. I'd like to say thank you very much to all of our speakers this morning. And then lunch? Okay, and after lunch we have the round tables. Do you want to? Hash.
Yes. Okay, so we've got lunch just now, and then after lunch there are 3 round tables. The information is on the programme anyway, but the first round table is the Repository of the Future. That will be in this room, room 1. The second one is the Parsimonious Preservation, when you can get into more discussion. That's in room 2, which is behind us, and you can access through the entry gates. And the third roundtable is on open access and academia. I think that's going to be quite a lively one. That's going to be in room 3, which is just past the developer challenge area. And I would recommend during lunch that you carry on exchanging business cards and chatting, that sort of stuff, but also make sure you check in with developer challenge people and see if you want to put an idea in, even if not a hack, because you can put in either. Thank you.